Hey everybody, how we doing tonight? I have a new guest with us tonight that I've been talking about for probably at least the last week. Is Stephen Meyer. Stephen, how you doing tonight?
Very good. Thank you for having me on the show, Jake.
Oh yeah, not a problem. I mean, it's an honor to have you on here. I love hearing more about the work that you do. So let's open up with that. What is it that you do? Just to give the audience kind of a generalization. I got a little bit in the description of the video, but that'll help everybody out.
Well, I am an author and researcher. I've written a couple of books about the Great Pyramids. I also have produced two documentaries about the Great Pyramid, as well as numerous magazine articles and that type of thing. So that's what I do, is a lot of that pyramid stuff.
Hi, Mud Rabbit. Thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I specifically noticed in some of the work that you did, you mentioned the water pumps. And that's something I don't hear a lot about when people talk about the pyramids. Can you tell us a little bit about these water pumps?
Well, the contention or direction of my research is that the Great Pyramid was a great big structure that was very expensive to build, but it provided a huge return on investment. In fact, a tangible return on investment. So we think that it did that by the Great Pyramid being a infrastructure, and that infrastructure pumped water. So we think the Great Pyramid was purpose-built to be a water pump.
And so were they using it like a water tower and pumping it to the town, or what were they doing with the water pump? What was it pumping water to?
Oh yeah, it had a whole host of purposes. Certainly, what the pumped water was for. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. What was the purpose of the pump?
Well, they certainly had water in the Nile River, okay, but that water is worthless for irrigation because it's down in the river. I live in a rural part of Oregon, and every farmer lives along the river and has a water pump, even though there's water right there. So we think that they use that pumped water for irrigation, certainly. Even though there was a yearly inundation, a one-time flooding isn't enough water for irrigation year round. So the original builders, who were geniuses, built this infrastructure to pump water, but also to power heavy machinery, to create compressed air, to do a whole host of other things. I see the Giza Plateau more of an industrial park or a science center than like a graveyard.
Okay. What are some of the other lost technologies that you've studied from that was your first book, Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramids? And what were some of the other things that you figured out that they had when it comes to technology in the pyramids?
Well, my first book, as you say, is titled Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid, available from Amazon. But yeah, there's a lot of lost technologies. One is the method they use to cut stone to extreme precision. That technology is lost. It's not fully understood, and it can't be demonstrated how the original builders did that by people now in modern times. Egyptologists say, oh, they just had a hammer and a chisel and a bronze chisel, and they used that bronze chisel and they hammered away, and they made like casing stones. The stones were on the outside of the Great Pyramid. But it's interesting that Egyptology has yet to provide a demonstration of how they think these stones were cut to precision. So that's a lost technology. Also, there was a bonding agent between the casing stones as well as some of the other stones inside the Great Pyramid. Very strong, known for being stronger than the stone itself. So those are two obvious lost technologies. Also, probably the way that the water was used could have been used for experimentation, to use it for medical purposes. Like I say, compressed air and other things. So those are some other lost technologies associated with the high civilization that built the Great Pyramid.
Have you heard the common thought that the pyramids were like a giant electric plant or a conductor for electricity?
Sure. There's a
Do you think
whole host of purposes that have been ascribed for the Great Pyramid, you know, the tomb or a beacon for aliens or some other thing. But yeah, some sort of a electric collector or whatever. But how that would work is up to scholarly debate. In fact, the Great Pyramid is still there, and I don't think it's collecting electricity right now.
No, I don't think so either. The other thing I wanted to ask was we were talking a little bit offline about Mud Rabbit. Looks like she's got a question. Says you can generate electricity with water and sun. Wasn't the pyramid covered in a smooth limestone?
The Great Pyramid, yes, was covered with casing stones that were cut to extreme precision, so precise that you can't make that precision with hand tools. Very large, precise sides that were cut to precision. They were cemented together. And some people say that was to generate electricity or to keep the Egyptian rain out of the inside of the Great Pyramid. So, yeah, exactly how sun and flat surfaces would generate electricity is hard to say. Well, there's lots of solar energy, but some solar energy you heat the water, and other types of solar energy you generate electricity. So how either one of those was accomplished that is consistent with the direct physical evidence is hard to say. But I do think that they used the Great Pyramid to pump water.
What do you think some of the largest blocks on the Great Pyramids weighed?
The largest stones in the Great Pyramid are the ceiling stones of the King's Chamber, and they're estimated to weigh between 70 and 80 tons. So that's pretty big. That's the weight of a railroad locomotive or the weight of an Abrams A1 tank. It's pretty heavy. 70 tons is certainly very heavy, beyond the scope of human back muscles to move and lift, you know, several hundred feet high. So, and Egyptologists, the entire science of Egyptology has never moved a single 70-ton payload 1 inch. So they tell stories, but they don't accompany those stories with demonstrations like you would with the scientific method. So yeah, big stones, very big.
So do you think with stones that big, does it support the theory, the common theory of they used logs to roll these stones into place and had slaves pull them, or has your research not dabbled into that? Or
that's a great theory. You know, it's a tremendous theory, except it can't be demonstrated in the real world. No one has ever moved a 70-ton payload using logs that would be consistent with what we see at the Giza Plateau. They've never moved and lifted a 70-ton payload up to 200 feet, let's say. And, if that could be done in a systematic method that doesn't produce handling scars on the stone, then you wouldn't need a water pump or water locks or anything like that. So what I suggest is people get an Abrams A1 tank, put it on a barge, and take it off a barge somehow, drag it off a barge, and then drag it up a ramp, a dirt road 200 feet high. And then you won't need alternative researchers or aliens or anything else. But it can't be demonstrated. Here's a good theory to think about. There's this theory, you could read about it. It's called cows jumping over the moon. And that's a theory, okay? Just like Egyptology, it's a theory. But it also doesn't have any demonstrations involved with cows jumping over the moon. So people, know about that theory, but they don't embrace it as being valid because it's not consistent with the scientific method. But somehow Egyptology can get away with it and then just tell a story, and then they validate it by their authority. So it's interesting, all of that.
I've been to Baalbek and saw huge columns there. The one that's still in the ground, no way we can move them these days.
They're big. They're to make a comparison. They're in the 900 to 1,000 tons. Those stones over in Lebanon and Baalbek, and it's a mystery how those were moved. But the largest stones of the Great Pyramid would be 70 tons, and even the 70-ton stones would be crushed using lumber logs. Just as cows that jump over the moon, their legs would be crushed when they hit the ground. So, so I certainly compare Egyptology's way of thinking with cows jumping over the moon, and I do that purposefully. So, but in the 1830s, okay, way back before the Civil War, they built the Erie Canal, and the Erie Canal was 4.5 feet deep. And the barges on the Erie Canal, when it was built, had a capacity of 70 tons. Isn't that interesting? Mm-hmm. 70 tons of grain, lumber, ore. So in the 1830s, using water locks and barges, people, even children, worked on the Erie Canal. They could move 70-ton payloads and lift 70-ton payloads. But now, modern Egyptologists can tell you how it was done, but they can't demonstrate it even one time ever.
Do you think it? So when you say that they couldn't use the lumber that's in the area, are you saying that they would only have used trees that were in the area, or do you think it's possible that it could have been dated back far enough where there could have been different vegetation in the area? Or basically, I'm asking, how old do you think the pyramids are? Do you think it's the proposed idea of how old they are? Or do you think it could have been in a more lush civilization where they had different trees around?
Well, that's a good question. The focus of my research is how the Great Pyramid was assembled, and also why they would go to such an effort to build that pile of rocks. But the age of the Great Pyramid is not really the focus of my research. For one thing, if you determined the age, it wouldn't really help that much. It wouldn't make a difference. Let me give you an example. Let's say, Egyptologists say about 4,500 years ago, but let's say we've determined without a doubt the Great Pyramid was 10,000 years old. The construction date was 10,000 years ago. Wow. Okay, we know how old it is, but that doesn't tell you much. That doesn't tell you, well, how'd they assemble it, or why would they go to such an effort? So I haven't spent much time on the age, but it's interesting to note that Egyptologists can't show us how the ancient civilization that they describe as ancient Egypt could have moved or even created a casing stone, let alone the largest stones of the Great Pyramid. So I would suggest that probably the age of the Great Pyramid is much older than Egyptology says it is, because they just make up stuff. Probably pre-Ice Age or pre-catastrophe. Dr. Robert Schoch.
I was just going to ask you if you saw some of Robert Schoch's work and his waterware that he found on the building that used to encase or surround the Sphinx.
Yes, the Sphinx enclosure has a lot of
Yeah.
water erosion, and he attributes that to weather erosion, water from weather, and that would put the Sphinx much older than traditional Egyptologists think it is. Now, Egyptology says that the Sphinx and the other pyramids were built within a few generations of each other, if you will, within the same era. But if the Great Pyramid was as old as Robert Schoch says the Sphinx is, that would be like 12,500 years, then that would put the age of the Sphinx much older. So if Egyptologists tell you something, certainly take it with a grain of salt, including the age of the Great Pyramid.
Because I've always wondered that how much I've never understood why people made it so difficult to do research in Egypt and why they didn't really want. Do you think the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids are the same age? Do you think they were built around the same times, or do you think they're different?
That's a possibility. Certainly, that's what Egyptologists would think, that they were built at the same time. But again, the focus of my research is specific to the Great Pyramid. There are other pyramids on the Giza Plateau, but there's no real features that indicate that they were all built within the same few generations. They could have even been built thousands of years apart from one another for several reasons, different qualities of workmanship and some different designs, probably at different purposes. So it's hard to say, but I do think that the Great Pyramid was built in distant ancient times and had a very important purpose.
Yeah, no, it's interesting looking at all the other pyramids in Egypt and seeing how the quality of build seems to have gone down from when they built their Great Pyramids. The other ones almost look like step pyramids, or they've fallen apart. They don't have those straight sides like the Great Pyramids do.
That's correct. So with different workmanship qualities and different materials, some were made from sun-baked mud bricks. But again, the sequence of construction, which you kind of mentioned, is again up to scholarly debate. So Egyptology has decided which pyramids were built before other pyramids and after. So, but that's not set in stone, if you will. So a lot of things are up to debate, and there's a revolution of understanding of ancient Egypt. So things are changing.
So how was the Great Pyramid a prosperity machine? How did it make money for Egypt?
Well, yeah, you could put it that way, money or whatever you want to call it.
Or comfort, or
you mentioned you have a business, and looking behind you, you seem to have a nice home that you're in. So your business, yeah, there's money involved, but ultimately provides prosperity for you. So your business is in effect a prosperity machine. The largest structure in North America is the Grand Coulee Dam. It's a big chunk of concrete. Mm-hmm. It was the biggest structure ever built when it was built. And all it does is make electrons go through a wire. Okay, hydroelectric dam. But it provides prosperity in a whole bunch of ways. I live in the Pacific Northwest, so I get my electricity from that dam and other dams. So, it provides prosperity. It provides irrigation and that type of thing. And that's what the Great Pyramid water pump did, just like all types of infrastructure, like the power grid. That's infrastructure. Even water and sewer systems for your municipality are parts of infrastructure, and the roads and streets. Roads are just a big, long piece of asphalt. I live next to a big road, kind of not right next to it, but it's Highway 5. I-5 goes from Washington all the way down to California, clear to Mexico, to San Diego. And our civilization built that infrastructure, but the amount of commerce and medical supplies and transportation. So it was an investment in infrastructure. And that's what I think the Great Pyramid was, and provided a huge return on investment. It wasn't a big tomb. So we had John F. Kennedy was assassinated probably maybe before you were born, but I remember it. I was a kid, and he was a revered leader. Ancient Egypt had revered leaders, but he was a revered leader. We didn't build a great big pyramid that might have cost $25 billion to build, a 45-story skyscraper, just huge and massive, that required more masonry than all the cathedrals in Europe, and then put him inside a big building like that. We didn't do that because that would be stupid. We put him in a hole in the ground and have the eternal flame and honor him that way. So no, the Great Pyramid, it would be stupid for us to do that. And the builders of the Great Pyramid didn't do all of that to make it look like to make it a tomb.
Well, the other thing I saw in some of your research is you said that the Great Pyramid water pump operated without carbon emissions or creating any greenhouse gases. How is it that it operated without any type of pollution or anything?
Well, a lot of machinery and mechanisms operate without the pollution. Solar energy that was mentioned earlier, solar cells on the ceiling or on the roof of your house. They don't, certainly there might be some pollution in the manufacturing of them, but in their operation, there's not. Hydroelectric dams neither cause carbon pollutions or that type of thing, even a heat pollution, but they do have environmental impact. But we think that the Great Pyramid had water that moved through the enigmatic passages and chambers through some stones on pivots that were like check valves, and ultimately pumped water. And that process is quite involved. And we have both my second book, well, I got a copy of it right here, The Great Pyramid Prosperity Machine. That's a whole book that with illustrations that talks about the involved process of water going through all the passages and chambers. And then my second documentary on DVD is titled The Great Pyramid Water Pump, and it has a huge number of computer generated animations that go through that whole process. Quite technical, kind of like trying to describe how a V8 engine works, but it's a fascinating process, and that's where we really get into the nitty gritty.
From a viaduct under it, that's possible.
I see that comment. They're the passages and chambers of the Great Pyramid. I don't know how the chamber of the subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid is 100 feet below the base of the Great Pyramid. So wow. I'm not sure how solar heat would really affect a chamber that low, but we think water went through that chamber, and other people, other researchers contend that water entered the Great Pyramid and went down the descending passage to the subterranean chamber. That's Christopher Dunn, including other researchers. So there's a number of people.
Set up at a good angle for that too, to have water flow through it. Because I've always wondered, because they kind of show a map of the inside of the Great Pyramids, and there's a point where it like drops, and I've always thought, I didn't know if it was a trap for grave robbers or what it was, but it does seem like it almost flows downward.
Yeah, the descending passage is at a 26-degree angle. It's about, the dimensions are real approximate that I'm giving, are about 300 feet long, goes all the way down to the subterranean chamber. We think that the process of implosion that was discussed by and researched by Victor Schauberger, people can look him up, and that implosion helped pump water up to the lower end of the Grand Gallery Then they used electrolysis in the Grand Gallery, which created a mixture of oxygen and hydrogen, which is very volatile. They ignited that mixture, which ultimately created a vacuum, and that drew the water up in the Grand Gallery, which is like a watertight chamber. It's almost like a cylinder, but it's not cylindrical. And that water piston probably weighed around 300 tons. And they released the vacuum, and that moved that water piston down and pushed water into the Queen's chamber, and then ultimately into the King's chamber and out the Great Pyramid. And then the water moved, I think, down passages that were in the casing stones, but those casing stones are gone, and ultimately to their point of use. There's some big excavations around the Giza Plateau, and we think they held certain types of machinery, possibly a hydro, what do they call it now? A hydro air compressor, if you will, no moving parts. And you can look those up, like a trompe is what it's called, oftentimes industrially scaled. And they use that compressed air to make, through a vortex, you can get extremely hot and cold temperatures that you can use for medical purposes, scientific purposes, tempering knives, and a whole host of other things. But yeah, there are hieroglyphs of an object, and some interpret that to be a lotus blossom. Some interpret that to be a light bulb. But that hieroglyphs is not at the Giza Plateau at all. So that is elsewhere in ancient Egypt. So they didn't have any light bulb hieroglyphics on the Giza Plateau. No hieroglyphs of a formal nature associated with the Great Pyramid, and that's because it's a machine. It doesn't need hieroglyphs. The tombs are covered wall to wall with hieroglyphs and pictographs inside the Valley of the Kings and all of that. And their temples are covered with hieroglyphs, but the Great Pyramid doesn't have any hieroglyphs inside of a formal nature. There are some quarry marks, but that's quite different. And the reason for that, it's a machine. You're familiar with machines. Like a car engine doesn't have a bunch of writing inside, maybe a few part numbers on some castings, but that's not its purpose. It doesn't need writing. So that's another indication that it's certainly much different than a tomb or a temple.
No, that makes a lot of sense, because otherwise, why wouldn't you, if it was a tomb or something like that, you would have, scribes go in there and put protection in it, or whatever, whatever else they wanted to put in for hieroglyphs.
If it was a tomb or temple that you built, you would have your name on it. Isn't that right? You built a business, and it's got either your business name or your name on it. So, but the inside of your equipment that has an engine or doesn't have your name on it, because it doesn't need your name on it there. So yeah, it's infrastructure. It's a machine. So inside a hydroelectric dam, down there where the impeller is and all the turbine and all of that, they just have maybe some castings with some numbers, but there's no writing about who funded it or anything like that. It's a machine. It doesn't need all that.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't make sense to put it in there. If anything, it would just wear away and be not even visible after a while.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's another question. If the pyramid supplied electricity as well as water, I think the Great Pyramid pumped water, and that pumped water was used to produce electricity and power heavy machinery. So just like hydroelectric dams, all they do is make electrons go through a wire, but there's a whole host of ways to utilize that type of energy. So certainly I think electricity was produced, as well as a whole bunch of other benefits from this piece of infrastructure. We
were talking about your foundation a little bit offline, the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation. And I saw that the goal of your foundation is to redevelop this ancient but highly advanced water pumping technology and use it in the here and now. How would you do that besides mimicking a dam? Is there a way that that you could, regenerate that wouldn't be in dam form, like the way they do it in the pyramids?
Yes, you wouldn't need to build a replica of the Great Pyramid and have that in your backyard. We would use modern materials and scale it down, certainly. So we would use polypropylene containers and PVC pipes, some off-the-shelf parts, also some custom fabrication, and we're working on that. It still has to be fairly large, maybe 2 stories tall, if you will, because the smaller the scale, the less volume you have, if you will. So if you make the passages and chambers half scale, their volume is 1/4. So there's a scalability issue on this and a whole host of other things. A bee, if you could genetically make a bee, let's say as big as an eagle, it couldn't fly because its weight would quadruple, but its wings, the surface would only double, if you will. So there's some scalability issues, and that redeveloping this ancient technology is the most cost intensive aspect of our foundation. Most of it is conducting research and, if you will, reading books, but we have a research library and pro bono legal counsel, board of directors, and everything else. But yes, we think it would be a tremendous alternative to hydroelectric energy, coal or natural gas fired power plants, or certainly nuclear. So we think that it could be a cottage industry, that each community could have this device that would pump water cheaply, and that pumped water or elevated water would be used to generate electricity. So it's kind of interesting, and we're doing, with the resources we have, we're doing the best we can. And I sure thank you for having shows like this to help get the word out.
Oh yeah, not a problem. Like I said, I'm always interested in hearing more about ancient Egypt and the Great Pyramids, because those just seem to be the biggest mystery that we have when it comes to Egypt nowadays. I have your site up here, thepump.org. And so if anybody wants to check that out, you can get some more information about the Pharaoh's Pump Foundation and some of the other work Steve's doing. Let's see here. The other thing I was going to ask is, just slipped my mind. Have you heard anything? Because I know you said you specifically aim more towards the Great Pyramids, but do you believe the idea that there could be a chamber underneath the Sphinx, or do you think it's probably not possible?
Well, that chamber below the Sphinx has been speculated about for hundreds of years. Some call it the Hall of Records. Mm-hmm. Some have predicted its existence, type of thing, and when it would be discovered. And some have said the Egyptology is hidden information from the world and all of that. So, but no, I don't know that. I'm not going to say it's not there, but certainly there's a lot of speculation about that. But for real evidence, is very hard to come by. There's always illustrations or pictures, often on Facebook, of the Sphinx with a chamber underneath it, but no photographs, if you will, so far. So believe it or not, there was, I don't know if it's still active anymore, the Kenneman group. And I'm not sure the exact spelling, but a guy in the 1930s predicted that there was some other chambers inside the Great Pyramid, and it gained some traction, but nothing ever came of it. So there's a lot of frosting and not very much cake on some of these speculations.
What pharaoh do they think constructed the Great Pyramids? Because I know there seems to be a misconception about what pharaoh or Egyptian person found the pyramids in the shape that they were in, and they were buried, and then they might have uncovered them. But I don't know about if there was a specific pharaoh that's credited to building them.
Well, in Greek, the name is Cheops, and it's all but more commonly known as Khufu. So that would be the Egyptian name. So is attributed to that Great Pyramid. So, but again, it's certainly not demonstrated how he did it. So, but if I was a leader, and there was a great big pyramid back in the back 40, if you will, I'd say, I'm going to take credit for that. If it was pre-existing. Let's say leaders now, the economy happens to be doing well, they take credit for it. You know what I mean? So, so who's to say, and possibly, again, my research is how it was built and why, but not when or who. So, but think about this. Let's say we determined that we found out that absolutely it was built by a guy named Bob. Okay. Bob built the Great Pyramid. He financed it and he built it. Well, the very next question is, well, how did he stack them rocks on top of each other? And why would he do such a thing? So, I kind of cut to the chase and go to those two questions more than who built it or when.
So when it comes to getting the pump working, how were they able to bring the things to build the pump? Do you have an idea of that?
Oh yeah. I have a big idea, a whole big book that addresses that question. So it's subtitled "How the Great Pyramid Was Built." So yeah, they had to move all these stones, more than the entire cathedrals of Europe through the entire Middle Ages. And it's a big construction job, a lot of weight. And weight is heavy. So we think that the original builders weren't like Egyptologists who tell a story but never move any stones. We think that the original builders were geniuses, and they were able to accomplish this monumental feat, which is us in modern times, we consider it a wonder of the world. What they did was they moved stones on barges. Many of the quarries are across the river, so all researchers agree that they used barges to move the stones somewhat. Also, the quarries for the largest stones are 400 miles away upstream on the Nile. So instead of dragging stones, 70-ton stones, 400 miles, they use barges, just like in the United States in the Erie Canal, we use barges because it works. So anyway, they built water locks between the catch basin and the Nile by the construction site all the way up to the construction site. And the first stones they set in place were the casing stones for the first level. So imagine those stones set in place. It would be like a square wall where the Great Pyramid is now. And that's what the construction site looked like. Well, they were able to fill that square wall with water, and those stones are cemented together, watertight. So they had a big square pond and water locks all the way down to the Nile River. Well, the very next thing is to bring the interior stones for that level up the water locks, one by one, all the way up to the building site and then into that pond. So barges were floating around with stones on that pond. And then they were able to systematically move those interior stones, most of which were about 2.5 tons, the weight of a car, and lift them off of the barge and right directly into that pond. And when that pond was filled with stones, the first layer of the Great Pyramid was completed. So the next thing they did was put the second layer of casing stones up and add an additional water lock up to that level. So they used additional water and fill that pond, that enclosure wall, if you will, with water. And they continued the process. Then they brought the interior stones for that second level and fill that pond up with stones. So the Great Pyramid was built level by level as it rose to the sky. And each level started with the casing stones for that level, and then the interior stones. And that is the sequence of construction that Sir Flanders Petrie, an early Egyptologist, said the Great Pyramid was built level by level, casing stones first for each level, and then the interior stones. He didn't think there was water involved, but that was the sequence of stone placement. So I kind of feel vindicated about that, and all that is in my book, and we even have on our website at thepump.org a video series, some short videos, some 6 or 7 minutes long, that describe the construction process in great deal, how they move the largest stones, set the capstone in place, and the whole thing. So I hope people watch that video series.
Yeah, definitely. No, so they almost had like a lock system around the outside, and then they just raise the water level, and then they'd, go up the next level. Is that what you're saying?
I am. Very similar to the Erie Canal, or certainly smaller water locks than the Panama Canal. But they did a water lock system. Water locks that are connected together is called a flight. So they had a flight of water locks up probably the north face and moved stones effortlessly and very quickly. The Erie Canal was able to move the weight of the Great Pyramid higher than the height of the Great Pyramid in a period of 2 years. So the water locks are very fast and powerful and controllable. So it's a fascinating production line method to move the stones to build their infrastructure.
It's Terry asked a question. He said, "What exactly are the barges built from?" Spices wood was native to Egypt or imported?
Yeah, the species of wood. We think that they use stone. On our video series, you can see that the water locks were made of stone. They needed to be fairly robust, but they probably had doors made out of short wooden planks. Herodotus was a 5th century BC historian and traveled to Egypt as much as a tourist as he was a historian. But he traveled to Egypt, and on the Giza Plateau, he was told by the priests that were there, which were probably tour guides, wanting their tip. But he was told that the Great Pyramid was built from the bottom up, kind of like I described, but finished from the top down. So when they finished the building, they didn't need the water locks. So they took them off from the bottom down. And that he was also told that the Great Pyramid was built using machines with short wooden planks. And how fascinating it is that water locks, like in the Erie Canal or all through Europe, early water locks had doors made out of short wooden planks. So it's very interesting to hear that type of stuff. That fascinates me.
Mud Rabbit says, if Edward Leafskin can move giant blocks of coral by himself, I'm pretty sure a few hundred men could manipulate those rocks in the same fashion once they're off the barge.
Oh, that's a great assertion. That's fantastic. The only thing is, in a manner that's consistent with the direct physical evidence of the Great Pyramid, it hasn't been done. Certainly Egyptology hasn't moved a 70-ton payload even horizontally 1 inch. So to contend a few guys with back muscles can move stones around, but is a contention that doesn't have validation through demonstrations. Look at it this way. In the 1830s, people had pretty good back muscles. Why, instead of going to all the expense to build the Erie Canal, which was the most expensive construction project in the New World when it was built, instead of building that, why didn't they just get a couple hundred guys to move those 70-ton payloads around, wheat and grain, lumber and coal? They could have just moved them with their back muscles. But see, the Erie Canal and the people involved with it were in the real world, and they wanted to actually do stuff instead of just saying, well, I could do it with back muscles. So so yes, they went to all the trouble to build water locks for the Erie Canal, which made New York City what it is today. In a way, it really made prosperity because of all that commerce. So in the same notion, they had to move a lot of freight and payloads to build the Great Pyramid. So they didn't just use a few hundred people with back muscles. They actually had a systematic process that actually worked in the real world.
Mud Rabbit was saying something else about I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. Lead Scanlon.
Yes, Ed, yeah.
Yeah, he's the guy I remember. He was a skinny old man, and he used to do it in the dark of night, and used to move them. And I heard something about he had 2 cones, and that's how he moved them. I don't know. I've heard a lot of different theories about it.
Well, certainly the Coral Castle is certainly different, but he did move some stones, that's for sure. But he had iron. He had a bunch of other things that were involved. I think the size of the stones he moved were a third the size of the largest stones of the Great Pyramid. He did have some poles and iron and steel chain and that type of thing. He also did not provide any demonstrations on how he did it. So it's hard to say. I do know that he moved his Coral Castle from one location to another, and he used big trucks, like you see on the highway, big flatbed trucks that moved it, using fossil fuels from one location to another. So there's speculation about what he did. And yes, he was a small guy, and there's small guys that work at the Panama Canal that move battleships. So, but certainly and it's a mystery what he did, but exactly how he did it and other things are up to scholarly debate. I'm not sure what he was trying to hide when he built it. So we'll see. There's speculation on how he did it and all of that. People say, well, he did it at the dead of night or whatever, but it's hard to say. But in terms of moving 6 million tons of stone and also moving massive payloads across a river, he didn't do that. He didn't. He was in a secret manner. He didn't move big stones very far at all. So he used fossil fuel trucks to do that. So it's a different application, different mysteries, if you will. The construction of the Great Pyramid and what Ed did over there at the Coral Castle.
Maybe it's similar to what we were talking about earlier with scale. If you're only got one guy doing it compared to a whole barge system and a bunch of people working together, I could see scale wise that. The more people you have involved and the better your system, the more you can produce from it.
Right. But it's difficult to compare the two things. Certainly there's mysteries involved in both, and heavy payloads were moved in both. But to say that they were done in the same manner is a stretch, if you will.
So, what other ancient technologies do you think have been discovered from your research and studying of the Great Pyramids? Um,
Well, the focus mainly is for us has been the Great Pyramid, but certainly the ancient Egyptians weren't knuckle draggers and one step out of the Stone Age and hauling stones up a big ramp or anything like that. Those explanations are falsehoods and are incorrect because they cannot be demonstrated in the real world. So, but there's other things that we need to know about ancient Egypt that, or the builders of the Great Pyramid. Certainly, they probably were very astute in understanding physics and the world around them. They developed technology from their understanding of physics, including, I think, similar to Victor Schauberger's concept of implosion, which I think is much more applicable than Coral Castle by a long shot. So that, and I'm sure they had medical understanding that probably we don't fully understand, and a whole host of other things. So that's part of the focus of my research, is that ancient mankind weren't Neanderthals or Stone Age or primitive by any means, but they were very sophisticated in a whole host of understandings and technologies. So one of the things I want to do is give them credit for being geniuses instead of just having some sort of a death cult and having their leader buried with a bunch of gold, which is worthless in terms of helping anybody.
yeah, exactly. Well, no, I agree with you. I mean, pun intended, but it sounds like a lot of the original theories of how they built the pyramids don't hold a lot of water. Um, but yeah, I've always thought that about some of these ancient civilizations is we don't understand how advanced they actually were, and we're starting to learn more about it today. But I do think it's possible that we're not the most advanced civilization to ever grace this planet. I do think with some of the ancient structures that we've found and just the mass of the builds, that whether you're talking about Pumapuku or the Great Pyramids or any of these ancient sites, that that technology just doesn't seem to be something we regularly use now. They always try to compare crane work, and we only have so many cranes that can move weights that large. And when it comes to some of these stones, that's why this water system is a lot better of an idea, because it's the only thing feasible for the time that we could at least fathom.
Yes, what you said, all that is very, very well said. Certainly, people compare the use of cranes, but they have high tensile steel and some huge steel beams and all of that, which is inconsistent and probably unnecessary for the civilization that accomplished those engineering feats. So no, we probably in some ways we might be a pretty smart civilization, but in other ways I think that we're not. That other civilizations were much more sophisticated than we are. In South America, a whole host of medicines that they use, like bark or leaves, that type of thing. We have synthesized and used today, like aspirin is originally from leaves of a plant in South America. So we've synthesized that now. So they were quite sophisticated in a whole host of things, probably astronomy and science, math, certainly, and physics, also in logistics as well, and agriculture, and a whole host of things. So I think ancient mankind, not just in the Valley of the Nile, but also in other places around the world, is, I think, much different than traditional historians, Egyptologists, archaeologists give them credit. I think much more sophisticated than we may ever know.
Does your work show any significance to the placement of the Great Pyramids and where they line up when it comes to the stars, and also the theory of the diameter of the Great Pyramids being the equivalent of pi?
Yeah, I know what you're getting at.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ideas that people have, like crunched the numbers, if you will, and they fiddled with the numbers and used different units of measure, even including the metric system, which wasn't around during ancient Egypt. But they less than a century ago, people came up with a whole bunch of correlations between the Great Pyramid and the Bible. They, the angles of the Great Pyramid somehow point to the birthplace of Jesus. You can look that up, and a lot of proponents and big, thick books are written about all these Bible Great Pyramid correlations and the Pyramid Inch, that the Great Pyramid confirms Bible prophecy and all of that. But that whole host of collection of these correlations have lost favor and are pretty much rejected now because they were just made up. People thought that because the numbers match up, that it's valid, but it's not. It's a correlation without causation, if you will. All these Great Pyramid Bible correlations, and even though they're precise and mathematically precise, they've been rejected because they were derived using some very poor research methods. Isn't it interesting that not long after that, another idea came up about pyramids pointing to stars for some kind of incoherent reason, and because they don't point, the Great Pyramid vents don't point to those stars anymore because of the precession of the equinoxes. Mm-hmm. The sky moves about 1 degree every 72 years. So they don't point to those stars. But anyway, that they did sort of in the past, and that sort of means something symbolically, or that they tried to tell us pi because of the numbers that somebody comes up with. And a lot of that, I think is has a foundation of some very poor research methods. On my YouTube channel, I have a whole number of videos that talk about the flawed research methods of the Orion correlation theory.
I think it's interesting, some of the theories that have come out about Mud Rabbit was just saying, do you get the feeling that they're trying to gaslight us with some of the information that they give out about the pyramids and some of what's considered public knowledge about how they were built and their purpose? And is there a meaning behind some of the stories that we've been given for what they're for, or why Egyptologists don't really let people study it that much? Or I don't even know the last researcher I've heard of going into the Great Pyramids and actually being able to do any new research.
Well, we'll get to that. Okay. Well, you can, when somebody has an explanation, it can be analyzed, like with the Orion correlation theory. So you can come up with some data points, like the vents were purposefully built, but they currently don't point to all of Orion and all of that. So maybe that's the information, but we can come up with an interpretation that because they don't point to those stars, they were made to point away from those stars, then they were trying to tell us symbolically that the Great Pyramid has nothing to do with Orion. No, I'm saying that all of that is some rather poor research methods used to come up with these correlations without causation. But people can study the Great Pyramid. All you have to do is pay money. And Egyptology is a money generating machine now in modern times. Recently, in fact, not too long ago, there was a scan that they were allowed to scan the Great Pyramid a while back. And then just recently, there was another scan that came up with an idea that there might be a hidden void or whatever. So yeah, you can study the Great Pyramid just if you can write a big enough check and go over there and do things. So yeah, people still study the Great Pyramid on site with the permission of the Egyptian authorities.
I didn't know if they were still letting people do it, because I remember, I think I remember watching Graham Hancock's debate with an Egyptologist, and the guy basically just walked out of the room and didn't want to discuss anything of their findings. And it was always interesting seeing some of the ways that they come to conclusions, and then they're pretty much set in stone on them.
Yeah, Egyptology is the only science that exists in the present day that is stagnated. All other sciences like science, physics, metallurgy, and all sciences are advancing in leaps and bounds. But Egyptology now is virtually the same as it was in 1900. So it's kind of a stagnated science, and they just repeat the same thing. You know, an Egyptologist becomes a professor, and then that Egyptologist tells a classroom of students that they used hand tools to make precision stone cutting, and that information is validated by his authority, and then you have a new generation of Egyptologists. So yeah, that Egyptology is a science that is in crisis right now, and because of their lack of using the scientific method.
It's wild that they would come to the theory of chisels and hand tools when they're clean cuts. It's not even there's not even chisel marks in some of the stones that we've seen pictures of, at least publicly. I don't remember seeing any chisel marks. I've seen some deterioration that I don't know what it is, but
yeah, there's some extreme precision. The casing stones have surfaces about 5 by 7 feet, but the variance in that flat surface is less than your thumbnail. So not only wasn't it done using hand tools like Egyptologists say, it can't be done. So all books written by Egyptologists have at least that error that is kind of a chink in their armor, and other things that they say, like the sequence of construction and how they were built, is certainly under scholarly debate right now.
With some of your theories about the water pumps, do you think it's possible they did some kind of water jet to cut things, like a high pressured water system?
Yes, there is speculation that some stones were cut in Egypt using water jets, and we use a similar technology now, but that's what they use the pumped water for. But again, they used it for irrigation, for municipal purposes, and for industrial purposes. So there was a whole host of purposes that provided prosperity for the civilization that built it. They didn't build it to tell us we knew pi or to anything like that, because we could do that. We could say, well, we'll spend $25 billion and make this big structure like a pyramid. We can do it in modern times. And so we could tell people 10,000 years from now that we knew pi. You know, so 10,000 people, or excuse me, that would probably be $600 or $700 per person, maybe more. So no, we won't do that because it's too stupid.
Yeah,
and it would be stupid for the ancient Egyptians to build a great big pyramid to tell us they knew pi.
Well, besides the significance of the internals of the pyramid, Do you think it's possible that they built it, as a remembrance of that there was a civilization there, a structure that would last? Like if you think of some of our structures in society, after man's gone, I always like to watch like Life After Humans and stuff like that. The land seems to claim some of the materials that we use today, and it wouldn't take long to not have any evidence of our civilization besides some of our stone structures that would stay and stuff like that.
I don't think the Great Pyramid had anything to do with us or any type of legacy or to tell us how great they were or anything like that. The Grand Coulee Dam has a larger than life-sized bust of FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was our leader, our pharaoh, who was willing to fund that big, huge construction project. But even though there's a big bust of him, that doesn't mean it was built, the structure was built to tell people in the future that we're we were a great civilization, even though it will last for tens of thousands of years, the Grand Coulee Dam. No, it was built to reduce poverty. It was built for prosperity, for abundance, and that type of thing. So no, there's nothing like that. There's nothing. I think that there's nothing symbolic, and there is nothing like that. No legacy issues involved with the Great Pyramid. But modern people look at it and are ethnocentric, and they think, well, what did they do for us, or what did they do to placate us? They didn't do any. They didn't care about us. They wanted their kids to eat. So that's why they built the Great Pyramid.
Well, I wanted to let everybody know where Steven's also taking questions as well. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on today? Because I also want to share your books again and show people where they can get them before we wrap things up. But if there's anything that you think we haven't covered, I want to make sure we touch on everything.
Well, that's about it. To say that the Great Pyramid helped people in a tangible way, that it provided a huge return on investment, that it was built effortlessly almost using water locks, and that you don't have to believe what Egyptologists tell you. And the other point was that these ideas of Bible correlations or star correlations that people make up, or whatever the next series of correlations, that's just people sitting by their computer playing with the math. They don't have to build anything, they don't have to do anything. So that's another point, that those ideas are being cast away, just like the idea that phrenology had, which was a collection of correlations between the bumps on people's heads and their character traits. They had all those correlations. You can see the pictures of skulls, ceramic skulls with it mapped out, where different personality traits are and everything else. It was taught in college, and it was.
Yeah, I've seen one of the heads, and you can touch all the different services and know what they all are.
Yeah, and that corresponds to character traits. The only thing is, that science that was taught in colleges went away. It left because it couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method. And all those correlations between the Bible and the Great Pyramid, you can read about them. It's called pyramidology. They kind of went away. Just religious zealots believe in that stuff because they didn't conform to the scientific method. They couldn't be validated. They were derived using poor research methods. And Egyptology, just telling stories and validating it by your own authority is not science. That's religion when you do that. And so we're in a revolution of ideas. You don't have to believe what they told you when you're in the 5th grade, And I just expect people to be like me, to be a researcher and pick up a book, pick up a book and read it. And if you find a book that you think you might disagree with, read it. Those ones will be more valuable than things you already agree with. This whole world now, we're all in our own echo chambers, Egyptologists talking to Egyptologists, and people that believe in star correlations talking to star correlations. And it's just a big, if I can say this, a big circle jerk of ideas. But broaden your mind and get new ideas about the technology of the Great Pyramid. So again, I've written a couple books. Read my books. You can get interlibrary loan them if you want. And my documentaries are available as well, or go to our website to find out more about our foundation and our mission statement, that type of thing. And you can contact me through email is best on from our website, or you can follow me on Facebook, that type of thing. But I also have a whole host of videos on my YouTube channel, which you can go to from the Facebook page. So don't forget to subscribe to that. So I just ask people to withhold judgment until they find out more about the research. I mean, I'm an older guy, but I know that if you're 30 years old and younger, you have a lot easier time changing your mind than if you become, older professors. They say that science advances funeral by funeral. So maybe we need more Egyptologists to have funerals.
Hey, it's the same idea. You can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Kind of, yeah. So allow yourself the opportunity to conduct research. Bear the burden of that responsibility on your own shoulders. Don't just pick out an expert like Zui Hawass or people that believe in the star correlations, or even myself. Don't just point at some expert and say, I'm going to believe what he says. Do your due diligence and enjoy the process of seeking truth. So that's my whole spiel. And again, if you have questions, contact me through my website at thepump.org.
Thepump.org. I'm going to pull up all those sites. I'm actually pulling up your YouTube channel right now as well, so that one of the guests in the chat was asking about it. But the other thing I was going to go back to with the star correlations that we were talking about, the other thing you didn't bring up that seems to be another one of those foo-foo ideas is what do you think about the ley lines, and that the pyramids are on some ley lines that attract energy? Then all of these ancient buildings were built on these ley lines, and they draw energy from them.
There is. You can read books about ley lines, and see pictures on the internet. Everyone now has a Photoshop or whatever, so they can draw lines on images, and you see a lot of lines that somehow, including the Great Pyramid, is built on a ley line. But of all my 30 years of research, that's as far as I've ever gotten on ley lines. I asked this question: how did ley lines help anyone in any tangible way? And they say, oh, well, and they talk about symbolism, or they show you the picture of the lines. But I don't know how did it help for them to say, well, the ley line's here, so that's where we're going to build the Great Pyramid or a cathedral or Stonehenge. How did ley lines help Stonehenge? And they'll say, well, they're there and ley line. Yeah, but how did it help? What did it do? I mean, did it do anything tangible, symbolic, or religious, or what? And then, it's like a stagnated idea. You can study ley lines. This is my opinion. You can study ley lines for 30 years, and as far as you'll get is ley lines. So I don't have ley lines never moved a big, heavy stone. Ley lines never built a building. They never made a sick person well. They never fed a kid.
Back to the star correlations. Do you think it's possible if we had any kind of certainty what the date that the pyramids were built on, would it add any significance to the star constellations and when they might have lined up? and if it ever correlated?
Uh, let me let me just pull up a graphic on my computer. I want to read it to you. Just give
Okay.
me a second.
All right. I'm gonna pull
That's
up.
another meme. Just hold on.
Okay.
Here it is. I got to get my glasses on because I got to read it. There's a book called Stargate Conspiracy. And here's a quote from that book. Okay.
Okay.
What it says is, it's on page 37 of the book Stargate Conspiracy. And they talked about the research methods used to come up with these correlations. And you asked, well, if we can figure out the date, then we can figure out the correlation. Isn't that what you asked?
Yeah, I was wondering if that made any significance.
Here's the quote. However, Robert Bauval is the guy that came up with a lot of these correlations.
Okay.
Okay. However, and this is the author of Stargate Conspiracy giving commentary on the Orion correlation theory. It says, however, some of Bauval's assumptions are open to question. For example, he presents a very circular argument that uses the stellar alignments of the shafts to prove the date of the Great Pyramid, but also relies on this date to prove that the shafts have stellar alignments. This is classic circular reasoning.
Okay, that makes sense because they're at an angle, and so if people are trying to say that the pyramids line up with these things, and he's trying to say that the shafts that are at an angle are lining up with them now currently.
Yeah, he's saying we know when the pyramid was built because that's when the stars and the shafts aligned. But he's also saying, well, we know that they were supposed to align because that's when the pyramid was built. It's circular reasoning, and it won't stand up to the rigors of legitimate academic research. That's why the Orion correlation theory will never be taught in universities as legitimate research, just as the phrenology, it was finally determined that it was racist and inconsistent with legitimate academic research, and it was rejected. It was thrown out of being taught in college, phrenology. But the Orion correlation theory will never be taught in colleges because it is based on circular reasoning and also correlations without causation. That's why you can never get someone who believes those correlations to talk about research methods because they are flawed.
Good. I'm glad you explained that for us because that seems to get brought up anytime somebody's talking about the pyramids. And
right.
Good to get a little bit of clarification with that.
Right. If we lived in, let's say, the 1920s, they would always bring up the Great Pyramid Bible correlations, how the pyramid inch corresponds with Bible prophecy, and how the Great Pyramid predicts the birthplace of Jesus, and all of that. Precision does not validate a correlation. Okay, there are 4 beetles in the group. The Great Pyramid has 4 sides. That's mathematically precise, but it's not valid because those 2 data points are not paired by another data point called causation.
Mm-hmm.
And correlations without a causation are a logical fallacy. So there's no feature specific to the Great Pyramid which indicates the original builders intended any relationship between the Great Pyramid and Orion. Well, people say, well, it points to Orion, but they don't. They point away from. Well, they used to, but it's all circular reasoning. So when you get down to it, that theory is in some tremendous crisis right now, and science's theories, they come and they go, and it's on its waning edge right now, the Orion correlation theory. So because people ask, how do you prove that a correlation is valid? Well, it's either math or something points to something. But there's a website called Spurious Correlations, and they compare the number of movies Nicolas Cage was in with the number of drownings in a pool. Those numbers add up and are precise. They have graphs and charts and everything at spuriouscorrelations.com. But even though they're mathematically precise, the many correlations that they come up with are false because they're just two random data points that they compare the numbers, just like I did with the Beatles, but that's false. So, I mean, the speed of light and the coordinates of the Great Pyramid. So what they do is they cherry pick two data points that sort of have numbers that sort of match up, but there's nothing to indicate that that's what the original builders intended to compare the speed of light in the metric system with the coordinates of the Great Pyramid. If you use the speed of light in miles per second, then the numbers don't match up, but the speed is the same and the location of the Great Pyramid is the same. So that's why trained researchers guard against using flawed research methods, because you come up with some flawed conclusions. And to be honest with you, Robert Bauval should have known better. I mean, he's put a lot of store into that, but it's going to be a cautionary tale of people, that you get caught up into that type of thing. And plus that the Orion correlation theory, if you ask them, well, all of these esoteric things about the Great Pyramid, like that was in the mind of the builders. Can you tell us how big stones were moved from point A to point B? No, we can't even address how the Great Pyramid was built. All we can do is look at it as a pre-existing artifact and then measure it to see if what symbolic meaning it has. So it's really strange. I've come up with what they call the Bible sacred geometry. So that's BSG. It's a whole theory of mine with the sacred geometry of a bicycle. See, the bicycle has two wheels, and that represents the regular world and the supernatural world. And the wheels, they spin, and that indicates that the builders of the bicycle knew that the earth spun on its axis. So you can just make this stuff up with the Great Pyramid or anything else. And but you need to have that causation to tie the two things together. Let me just say this one last thing. The original builders, the speed of light and the coordinates seem to like the numbers sort of match up. But what they were really trying to tell us was how many days there are in a year, and they got it wrong. And people say, well, how do you know that? And I would say, well, they got the numbers wrong. Well, how do you know that? Well, how do you know that they're talking about the speed of light? Well, the numbers match up. Well, they don't match up if you use the miles per second. So all of these correlations that people make up between the Great Pyramid and rainbows or the human anatomy, I mean, a lot of that is not very good, not stellar in the research method. So, but I talk about a lot of that in my YouTube videos.
Well, no, I'm glad you have that same realization that correlation doesn't have anything to do with causality, because they have to line up. If it doesn't mesh, just because you have the same numbers, and that's with a lot of things, not just the Great Pyramid. That seems to be a common practice these days, where people just find similarities in something and they go, "Oh, it must be a sign," or I feel like that's common practice now.
Or something that looks like something else, and then Shazam, they're related. A lot of the tombs in Egypt had the mummies were in coffins that were inside coffins and inside another coffin. King Tut is a great example. I think there were 6 or so coffins that he was in. So they were all nested, okay? Well, in Russia, they have these nested dolls, okay? There's a similarity there. Shazam, it's a correlation. Well, there's no relationship between nested dolls in Russia with the nested coffins over there in ancient Egypt. So to compare things that look like each other is a very poor research method. So and it's important to if you're going to be a researcher to be familiar with research methods. I mean, I saw a cloud the other day that looked like a puppy dog. So did puppy dogs evolve to look like that cloud, or did that cloud change its shape to look like the puppy dog for an intended relationship? No, it's
Well, I
just
don't know.
they just look alike.
Because dog backward is God, and God is supposed to be up. So let's find all the correlations we can.
Yeah. There's a word that I want you all to look up if anyone's still watching. It's called patternicity. It is the propensity for that people sometimes have to see meaning in random data. The sink faucet in my bathroom looks like it has a face. You know, the two knobs and the center thing looks like a nose. Well, it wasn't intended to look like a face, but it sort of does. You can see the face on the moon and that type of stuff, but it didn't evolve into a face. It's just meaning that we superimpose over data. So a lot of that happens with people that study the Great Pyramid. And on Facebook, I make a lot of memes to address some of these things about some flawed research methods. So so keep all of this in mind and visit my website at thepump.org.
I'm going to pull up those sites because a couple people were asking about them. So I'm going to share your YouTube page really quick. And the definition is pareidolia is the type of
yeah. Pareidolia, that's where you see faces and pattern, specifically.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pareidolia. You don't hear that much, but you can see like the knots on a board. Some people say, "Oh, that's a face like a dog or an alien." Well, that's pareidolia, where you see a face. But patternicity is where you can see just more random, it's a wider range of things that you can see, if you will, that weren't intended, but you superimpose this kind of meaning to the data that you see. People do that with tea leaves, if you will, and chicken entrails, and they superimpose some meaning on that to predict the future, that type of thing. But yeah, so if you want to be a researcher, first thing you need to research is research methods. Don't research anything but research methods, and find out what is a poor research method or a low standard of evidence, and find out what's a high standard of evidence. And so that's all that I suggest people do. We were going to lead a tour to Egypt in February, but that has been canceled because of COVID last February. So that was sad.
I saw that posted on thepump.org.
Yeah, co-lead that with Barbara Jean Lindsay. Her website is barbarajeanlindsay.com. She's a great lady with written several books, that type of thing. So, but maybe we can reschedule that if things ever get better.
I got your YouTube page pulled up, and that's the spelling of it. You guys can go on there and see it if you want to see any of Stephen's other videos that he does. I'm also going to pull up thepump.org too, so everybody can see it. So be sure to jot these down. I know Mud Rabbit was asking about it, and a couple other people in the chat were asking about some of your sites. So
yeah, there's some fun videos. I have my theme song, and that's it's only like a music video, and a couple other, but also some serious ones about research methods and about the flaws of the Orion correlation theory. Also, one is titled is Egyptology a pseudoscience? And that has gotten a lot of interest. So we hopefully people can watch those videos, instead of watching sports or whatever. So again, thepump.org, our nonprofit foundation, is looking for a plasma cutter for our research facility and a 3D printer. So if anyone wants to be involved in any type of donation, we would certainly put a link back to the donor for that. So keep that in mind and get involved. Find out what we're about, and you can even help us with web design. So that would be nice. So find out what we're about, and
you got your email right here on the top in case anybody wants to get a hold of you as well.
Yeah, info@thepump.org, and then you can see our. You can email me if you have any questions about what we're doing, our progress, and our activities. So it would be worth your while, I think, if you're interested in how that ancient wonder of the world was built and why they would go to such an effort to do that. And I think that they did it to provide a huge return on investment. So I think water pump is the biggest and most profound return on investment that has ever been proposed for the Great Pyramid.
I also want to share that that interview that you shared with me, because that was also a good interview. If people want to check.
Yeah, it was an interesting interview. I've done that a number of years ago. I've been doing a lot of interviews, but it's in article form, so it's a quick read. You don't have to just 10 questions and talk about just give some fairly short answers to these 10 questions, and you can get up to speed with the direction of our research and go from there. So I know it's a fun thing to do.
And that's at Benz10wordpress.com.
Yes. Yeah, I'll actually post that on my Facebook page just for the fun of it.
Okay.
If people want to come by and
people can check it out
and see that. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and it's been a fun ride. I mean, I've met a lot of interesting people and talked to a lot of people and learned a lot about conducting research about ancient Egypt. I respect and admire the ancient builders of the Great Pyramid more every day. And I understand that we're in a revolution of ideas in all things, certainly politics and medicine, geopolitical issues, energy issues. And who would have thought there'd be all these electric cars that are coming along? So things change, and the old ideas are being pushed away by newer, truer ideas. So it's an exciting time to live and to conduct research.
Speaking of electric cars, we didn't even get into Baghdad batteries or anything like that today, and some other technologies.
Yeah, just real shortly, Egyptologists say, "Oh, that's some sort of a religious icon that they fiddled with or whatever." But other researchers who probably don't have a degree recreated Baghdad batteries, with the copper tube and the iron nail in the middle and grape juice, and it actually works. It makes a half a volt of electricity, which is pretty good. And so it's just a different outlook. Egyptologists, they'll tell you a story. Other researchers use the scientific method and provide a demonstration. So it's interesting, the stagnation of Egyptology compared to what real researchers are doing.
Oh yeah, just think if we were working on batteries since then. We're just finally getting caught up with our battery technology now, where we can actually store energy in batteries. I mean, that's why I think our solar power took so long to catch up, is because we couldn't store the energy anywhere.
That's true. But the improvement of these batteries, their performance is improved, but there's some environmental impacts. with their manufacturer and disposal. But yeah, with the improvement in batteries, it made all the difference in the world, and it's exciting stuff. That technology and just the whole revolution that we're going through. It's a good time to be alive.
I also wanted to share one last time your Facebook so everybody can see everything you're sharing on there as well. It also has your 2 documentaries on it and your 2 books. And I want to make sure everybody can see what that looks like and catch you on there as well, because you seem to have a lot more information on here as well. So I want to make sure.
Yeah, it's certainly more interactive than our website, but the Facebook page is where I kind of let my hair down if I had any and have a little fun. But that's where everybody's at. So that's, what we do and provide some information. But from the pump.org, you can go to all of my links, Facebook, YouTube, and all of that. But get involved, not necessarily with us, but with something, make a difference in the world. That's what we're here for, not just to take up air. So if you think that you can be involved with what we're doing, contact us. And when I say be involved, I mean, pray for us. You can also share our website's web address on Facebook and say, hey, here's something interesting. Or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, or talk it up. And if you don't have anything else to talk about, say, hey, wouldn't it be neat if the Great Pyramid actually helped people, and talk about it. So it's information that a lot of people are not familiar with because they stay in their echo bubble. And but we're getting with shows like this, more and more people are finding out about it all the time. And a lot of people, when they get into it, the word that they use is compelling. The production line manner of the movement of stones and the value of what a water pump would do and all the ways that pumped water could be used. So there's, Egyptologists know it's just a wall of silence and that type of thing. But people who are truck mechanics, people who work in shipyards, people that actually do something in the world, builders, people that know what it takes to drive a 16-wheeler, 18-wheeler, or whatever. All these people that do stuff in the real world can see the value of the direction of our research, as opposed to, they had logs and they just rolled it on logs, but we can't show you how they did it.
Yeah. No, as soon as I saw your work about the water pumps, I was like, this seems to be the only feasible option. Like, I don't understand how we're ever going to try to explain this if we can't even demonstrate any of these log experiments or anything like that. And this seems to be, hopefully you guys get a version of it up and running where you can actually demonstrate it and promote this on a mainstream where the science can actually get out.
We're working on that. In the West, we use expensive infrastructure like hydroelectric dams or nuclear power plants to generate electricity to irrigate, using water pumps. But in the third world, they can't do all that. So this would really help third world countries with this more low tech, and they could build the pumps out of local materials like 55-gallon drums and that type of thing. So that's we are a humanitarian organization and want to help people in that regard, have the design open source, if you will. We're not going to sell the pumps or anything like that, and people can develop that technology and apply it to their own needs. So it's there's some potential. It's difficult in some people. It's a hard sell, but other people like yourself feel that it has some compelling aspects to it. So we're working on it. And if you know of a angel funder like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or one of them guys, if you know any of those guys, when you're at a dinner party, tell them about the direction of our research and see what happens.
Well, I'm hoping you patent this idea once you come up with it, because I feel like somebody might take this technology from you if you don't. That's the last thing they want to get out.
Well, if we can help people, then that's what it's all about, really. So
yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much for being on tonight, Stephen. And yeah, we're gonna have to do this again soon, and maybe catch up again and talk a little bit more, because I know there's more questions coming in constantly. And yeah, I'd be happy to have you on again, and we can talk a little bit more about Egypt. And if you want, we can dive into some of the theories about Egypt and everything else going on in Egypt, because there's
there's a lot going on, actually.
Oh, so, yeah. I'm surprised we didn't talk about the what's it called, the hieroglyphics that show like a helicopter and what might be a spaceship, and there's all kinds of fun stuff we could talk about when it comes to
But well, hopefully I could be on again, and I appreciate that offer, and that's very much an honor if I can come back again.
Oh, well, thank you. It's an honor to have you on here. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jake.
Thank you.